Great. Okay, so welcome everybody. We've started part three of our three-part Mastering SkyGlass training course. Really appreciate everybody's time that you've taken the last couple of days, and today will be a shorter day. It's definitely going to be more than 30 minutes, but we'll try and keep it shorter. We won't probably go for more than 45 or an hour. All right, so great. Let me share my screen and we will get started here. All right, we're going to share desktop one, I think would probably be the best thing. Okay, great. All right. Okay, cool. So, as you can see on my screen here, I've got SkyGlass running, and here's our schedule. The things we've covered the last couple of days. Intro to SkyGlass. We went from, just as a quick review, we went from sort of zero to hero essentials with our couple of handles that you always want to keep at the ready when you're changing your zoom level or changing your home location. Those being, the first primary is the height adjustment slider, making sure that you get the full range of traffic altitudes within view. And then you can change the size of the graphics, aircraft, etc., labels. And again, all this is really dependent on if you're in standard mode to limit your search radius so you're not overloading your computer or your memory. And we did a lot of working of those problems, changing home locations, all that stuff. We talked about the watch list basics, also talked about using the aircraft database to build up your watch list, and we covered the saved setups, which is the new feature in the latest release of 2.1.30. Yesterday we covered 3D airspaces. We covered the Overwatch in both flavors, the creating geofences, and then also creating the alerts for your watch list. And let's see here, hold on one second. Let me just change my view so I can see everybody. There we go, perfect. Great. And then before we get started on today's topics, I just want to remind everybody, please feel free to drop any questions in chat. And I'm going to have Ren help me monitor that if there's any new questions in there. And please also feel free to add comments or any feedback from the sessions. You're welcome to do that in the chat as well. Okay, so today we're going to be covering the Pro Plus features, which are mainly about weather and sort of the NOTAMs, Notice to Airmen, that are available related to weather and TFRs. One thing that we didn't cover yesterday, which we'll cover today, probably first thing, is the animated weather overlays. And then we will run another example of running flight history reports. So you kind of see, what Monkey often does is he'll pick a watch list group and run a 5-day report or a couple-day report to kind of see the trends. And then we'll also talk about aircraft performance circles, which is a new feature in 2.1 that I haven't actually touched on at all. And then I did prepare a few tips and tricks to cover. Move that off to the side. There's our tips and tricks. I did want to cover, though, some research I did with some AI help. Asked ChatGPT about danger zones. So I'll make this available. Probably I'll post it in Discord. If anybody wants this information, I'm happy to give it to you as well. But I think the salient point was, I actually asked it, like, when do they start using them and that kind of stuff. The activity types, so this is really kind of like what's happening in these danger zone areas. Let me make this a little bit larger so it's easier to see. And so as you'd expect, the typical ones are military operations, things that are happening from either a munitions testing perspective, live ordnance, or fighter trainers, dogfighting, that kind of stuff. Generally, those are in military operation areas. That's sort of the traditional one, but they do happen in these danger zones. Space activities, environmental hazards, industrial zones, and again, most of these are going to be NOTAMized, so the times and start times, stop times, things like that will be in NOTAMs. If you're a pilot, you're familiar with how to go get NOTAMs. I'm working on deeper integration to that, but that's a very complex and huge system. At any one time, there's like literally 15 to 30,000 NOTAMs, and it includes little stuff like this, taxi light is inoperative on this runway and things like that. Most of these NOTAMs are irrelevant to most people, and it's a bit of a work to filter out the heavy ones. At any rate, so there's some interesting detail about danger zones. If you want to get that from me at another point, you're welcome to. All right, so let's jump into the, let me move off. Let me get this off the screen. Hold on one second. There we go. All right, tips and tricks are later. Okay, so let's talk about weather and the 2D weather overlay system. Let me dress up my view here so we can get a good focus on that. I'm going to turn off some of these other features and just dial up. All right, let's turn off auto refresh. All right, so there we go. Okay, and let me move to I'm just gonna, again, peeling off all these other features. I'm gonna move to military mode just so we are not gonna get any traffic loading inadvertently. I'm gonna switch to my CONUS. So we're gonna sort of look at a macro view here of weather, and I'm gonna zoom out so we see the whole country. All right. And you'll notice we've got a couple of big bars here, loading satellite, loading radar. And as those populate, they pop off the screen, as you can see there. All right, so for basic level folks, you're gonna get the non-animated weather. So basically you're gonna get the 2D weather overlays like you see right now, and they're not gonna move. They do update every 10 minutes. There's a new data set that's available. So SkyGlass does have an internal clock, and you can see that here. It says refreshing in 8 minutes is when the next update is available. You can turn on either the radar side, which is sort of, obviously the colorized version, or the satellite, the 2D satellite, which is, and again, I don't know, I'm not an expert in this, what the technology is behind these systems. I know that the radar especially is a terrestrial base. They're from the NextRad sort of sensors that are on the ground all over the place. So point is there, you're not going to get radar coverage out over the oceans, right? These are terrestrial sensors, at least this source of data is. Always looking for new sources of data, so that may change over time. The satellite, however, that is from public domain satellite data. And again, the source that I use aggregates that for me and kind of puts it in a nice format to download. But you'll notice that, where you'd think, like over here, where you'd expect to see radar colors, you're not going to see them because we're out over the ocean. Okay. As far as the configurations, you click on the gear wheel button, and again, we're in pro mode, so you're going to get a little bit more here. Even the standard mode has the radar opacity slider, so you can kind of tune, how things look for you. When you've got traffic and other things going, this is kind of where, again, you want to customize the view to make sure that you can see everything that you need to, and what's important to you is highlighted for you. All right, and then there's obviously some color options for the NextRad radar. And these are just some default color styles. I kind of like the NextRad simple one, but there are a few in there if you can play around with. And then there is an option for the resolution, whether it's high or low. If you've got a computer that you're really trying to conserve memory for, you can drop this down to low, and you're probably not going to see a huge difference, especially at this sort of macro level countrywide, but an area where you can change the resolution that's being downloaded, save some memory. And then if you are a pro level user, then you have the option to animate this. Sorry about that. Let me turn you off. There we go. You have the option to animate, which means that it's got a history every 10 minutes of the last 2 hours that it will sort of load up. Let me go ahead and turn that on now. And then it'll just sort of step through. And then, so the first loading cycle takes a little bit more time. As you can see, they're painting in now. And then once it is completely loaded, then you can actually set the pace of the animation in this last part here, the speed, slow or fast. So we can kind of make it medium and wait for those to render in and download. And again, every 10 minutes, there's a new set of data. And so you're going to see the screen kind of wipe, go gray, and then they'll fill in again as the data is loaded up. So what I like to do while we're waiting for this to load, I think the most interesting sort of way to look at aircraft, or I'm sorry, this weather system is to also bring in the 3D weather, which is available in the Pro Plus, which is the weather airmets and sigmets. So I'm just going to go ahead and load those now. And I'm going to bring up the thickness of those so we get the nice visibility, and we're going to stretch them up so we've got a good clear separation of flight levels. And move this back over the side. And so now you can see we've got some sort of obvious correlation. See, now we're going to get some good animation. And again, like some of these, the data source that I'm getting the satellite and radar from is not perfect. I've noticed it does sometimes have these little glitches. Again, that part is not necessarily a glitch within SkyGlass. It's the data is actually, this is what I'm getting, and so it's being displayed, and there's no way for me to tell if it's sort of inaccurate or not. So let me just demonstrate the fast. And this is kind of what people are used to when you're looking at, an animated weather website. You can also turn the animation off and then just step through it, each stage. So I'll leave it at the most frequent. And it looks like we got some stuck loading bars here. So let me just hit the stop button to clear that. Okay. All right. And where was I going? I think I was talking about the airmets and sigmets. Right, so there are only a handful of types of airmets and sigmets. The distinction between what is an airmet and what is a sigmet. Airmets primarily affect smaller aircraft. Sigmets, airmets meaning aeronautical meteorological event, I believe. And then sigmet is a significant meteorological event or zone. And the sigmets affect all aircraft, big, small. That's why there's sort of a distinction about that. The most classic typical sigmet are convective sigmets, which means thunderstorms. Okay, so that's this orange or yellow color. I'll also note that airmets are sort of a US only phenomenon. I get this data from the FAA, and they have an international sigmets feed, which I actually, poll at the same time that we do the airmets and sigmets. And so like this one in particular here, let me pull up the data, the detail. So I'm doing that via the airspace panel on the left, and then there's a pop-out panel here. And then when we hover over something, it'll give that extra detail. So these are international sigmets, anything outside the States. And they will include things like turbulence, but if you're over the United States, then those are typically in the airmet category, and you won't see sigmets for turbulence unless it's something super heavy. At any rate, all right, so what I would also like to do is I'm going to turn down the satellite opacity just so we can really see a good, clear indication of these airmets and sigmets. Okay, so as I was talking about, the sigmets, convective sigmets are this orange color. And then there are, so in the list here, that's this cloud with a lightning bolt. So I'm going to turn those off and just kind of peel these layers back. The next one are these purple colors, which are turbulence, airmets, and sigmets. And you can see there's generally a nice sort of separation. There's high level turbulence and then low level turbulence. Sometimes they're ground level. So I'll peel that layer off. And then we're left with this icing conditions, which are these sort of pink. I'll peel that off. And then we've got, yeah, so here's a sigmet for turbulence, different from an airmet. In the list here, you can see the airmets have the yellow broken border, and the sigmets are the red broken borders. So I'll peel off the turbulence sigmet, and now we're left with IFR conditions. So these are always going to be pretty much very close to the ground. These are these signify where most likely you're going to have IMC, meaning you're going to be in IFR conditions, which is for non-pilots when you can't see out the cockpit. You're in a cloud and you have to rely on your instrumentation to do all your navigation, and which is a trippy experience, I'll tell you that. But anyway, these are these IFR airmets, and they're, as you can see, they're always real close to the ground. You'll often get these right near the coastline where the fog tends to create, near the sublimation areas of different coastlines. And then finally, so let me peel that layer off. And then finally, we've got these ash alerts over volcanic areas. So these are volcanic sigmets. All right, so let me bring them all back on. Any questions regarding airmets and sigmets and the 2D weather overlay?
I can't find where you brought that menu up. Can you just show briefly again where you brought that menu up for the sigmets?
Sure. So yeah, so the pro level features are this icon here, and I apologize. This main button stack has a couple of extra things in here. These are development aspects that I'm working on, so you're not going to get those at all. The basic level won't have those, and then you also will not have these two big major buttons. But clicking on the pro level will show you the airspace drop-down list, or I'm sorry, the vertical button stack, which includes the airspaces, the airports, the overwatch, the reporting section, and then this sort of ancillary one. And then the final one, the pro, is the weather one here, and that brings up this NOTAM TFRs, weather, airmets, and sigmets. Is that clear?
I had it turned off. Thanks.
Yeah. So you'll probably notice I've been doing a lot of like collapsing the user interface a bunch. It's that bottom button. So let me expand it, and that will basically show the auxiliary button stack and any other panels except for the weather overlay. I haven't actually included that in the minimization list. But if you do that, then those are hidden, but you can kind of build them back up sporadically if you just turn these features on and off, right? So that's how I kind of get this hybrid, half minimized, half exposed user interface. All right, so let me drop that down. Okay, cool. Any other questions regarding the weather piece? Go ahead, Rin.
You might mention you can turn weather and satellite on and off independently.
You bet. All right, so let me, yeah, we'll turn off the satellite, and let me get the airmet details off here. So yeah, most people would find some good functionality in turning on the radar and then just having the radar animate. And incidentally, if you're trying to be, memory management conscious or manage your memory, the radar is much lighter from a texture information perspective than the satellite data. So if you want to just get the essentials, you probably want to just turn on the radar and then have it be non-animated, in the latest time stamp. And then again, low res if you want to really conserve. So radar only, low res. And then if you want to keep going up, add the satellite. That's going to, all those satellite tiles will pull memory, and then animated. Obviously, that's going to bring 20x the memory required for those. And if you pull up your activity monitor or your resource task manager on Windows and enable, disable these features, you can see the memory hit as they load in. Okay, cool. Anything else? Any other questions regarding weather or the airmets, sigmets? Looking at chat, nothing there. All right, cool. Perfect. Welcome, Dennis. And little Granby. Lee Granby, I'm sure, not little. Sorry about that. All right, cool. Excellent. Okay, great. So kind of harkening back to the save setups, I like this as a save setup. So I'm going to go ahead and create that now. I don't think I have one for that. So turn that on, and we've got CONUS was the last home location. So I'm just going to update that and say we're going to be USA weather airmets, sigmets. Kind So if I'm kind of getting into my day and kind of doing a top level briefing for myself, I'll do a weather briefing here, kind of get a feel for the weather that's happening, and then I'll drill into the military setup. We'll do USA Mill, and then I usually pop down to my local area and turn on my watch lists and my Overwatch, etc. All right, cool. So let me get back to my, all right, so now we've covered the weather overlay, which was kind of the holdover from yesterday. We've covered the airmets and sigmets. While I have the military traffic up and loading, I'll cover the aircraft performance circles. So if you're in the pro level, this is a pro and pro plus level feature. If you hover over an aircraft and you right click, you get this little pop out menu, and you've got some expanded options. Obviously you can do your add to watch list and remove from watch list. You can show the trace, but these are these aircraft performance circles. So the max visibility, I'll turn that on. The max visibility is a basic calculation based on the aircraft altitude and its maximum line of sight based on curve of the earth, basically. So it's kind of the maximum distance that it can see and be seen, not taking into account any meteorological conditions. So that's really going to be the limiter. If they're in the clouds or there's cloud formations or visibility is low, then that's going to limit this. But this is basically telling the story of this is how far this aircraft could see with in perfect conditions. And then if you were on the ground, this is the possibility of where you could see this aircraft, right? So that's kind of the two, the story that's telling. And then if we turn on the glide distance, in this case, because it's unknown, this is a bad example. So let me move on to a different aircraft. Let's find something a little bit lower to the ground. Well, let's pick this guy. What is he? PC-12. Okay, great. So I'll show the max visibility and then the glide distance. All right, and again, these are based on altitude. And you can see the differences are quite dramatic. The glide distance is a different calculation based on the typical glide ratio of that aircraft class or type. There are a few aircraft specific types that I was able to go and find online. Like a Cessna 172 is very easy to get the actual glide ratio of those aircraft. For those that I couldn't get the glide ratio specifically for that type, I did sort of a generalization of that class of aircraft. And for those who don't know, glide ratio is really based on weight and most importantly, the form factor of the wing. What the lift factor is of that aircraft wingspan. But basically it says if this aircraft was able, or lose power, and configured itself for optimum glide, this is how far they could go. So it's kind of an emergency, like, okay, they lost power. This is where they've got to find a touchdown point because they're landing whether they like it or not, kind of a thing. All right, and then if you notice, there is a little readout at the bottom. Will show what the glide ratio is that's being used to be in this calculation, and then what the distance is. And if we do update, if this aircraft is descending or climbing, these glide ratios and visibility distances will recalculate and will change over time. So for the helicopters, obviously the glide ratio is not as useful, but they will have nice visibility circles. Any questions on the performance circles? This was kind of a fun little feature to bootstrap, really based off what Monkey was doing. Noticing that there were these high flying surveillance type aircraft and stuff. I thought it would be interesting to see what the distance would be in like the sub hunters and things like that we know have sensors and they're actually looking at stuff, what the coverage area would be. So that's what kind of inspired this one. But while I was at it, I thought, yep, glide ratio is something that's kind of low hanging fruit. Could do that too. And I'm totally open to suggestions if anybody's got an idea on another type of performance or graphic that would be related to aircraft performance or something of that. That would be I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, all right. So that covers the performance features that are currently in SkyGlass. So let me turn off the glide distance for him. And the max visibility for him. And you notice this little pop-out window is going to persist until I move my icon away from it. So if it's underneath the mouse, it's going to stay there as long as the mouth is there. Then once you move it, then it'll go away. All right. So since we did get an emergency that popped up here, let me talk about emergencies here. I don't think we've covered this at all in the training. So in the aircraft classes, I know we talked about, the standard aircraft, which is anything that's not a military or masked. And then any of those can be, can declare an emergency and become an emergency aircraft. And that's this toggle here. If one is in the field and pops as an emergency, you can click on it and it's going to zoom to that aircraft. And then you can see the aircraft has a special background, and it's interesting that's not animating. Let me make a note of that. So it'd be very easy to call out from the field of aircraft where that what emergency that is, and then this one isn't giving as much detail. Just general emergency, could be anything. You'll often see NORDO, which means no radio, lost communications. And then you'll see other things like unlawful, which we're still trying to kind of figure out on Discord. Anything from it's having unlawful interference, or one possibility is it's been hijacked. It's got kind of a, there's something unlawful happening inside the airplane at the time. But we've been searching around this. I've been looking for that answer for a long time, actually. Haven't really been able to find anything definitive. And we'll also notice, like for this aircraft, the squawk code is not a 77 or a 7000 series. So that's used to be the rule, and now it can or cannot be. It all depends, I think, on the FAA and what they determine. If they ask that aircraft to squawk a different squawk code, then they will. Often they'll just keep it as the pre-assigned squawk. Does that make sense? Everybody understand what I mean by squawk? So the transponder, the 4-digit transponder code that you're assigned when you go and you're in controlled flight. All right, cool. Or under flight following, if you're familiar with that one. All right. So, boom, boom, boom. Let's get into the last feature discussion, which is the reports. So let me turn off that. And most of y'all are going to be running reports on probably watch list groups, right? Which means you're going to build up a watch list group, and then basically you're going to want to see like, well, I want to see all the traffic that group has done over X amount of time. All right, so let me bring up the watch list. And let me clean up my interface a little bit. Turn off the Pro Plus. I'm going to turn off the vertical sliders. We don't need to be in auto refresh mode. It's going to pop us out of that automatically, but all right. So, all right, let's pull the group. I've got a pretty significant watch list going here, about 5,000 aircraft, or almost, yeah, a little over that. Any group we want to run a report on? I have 14,000 computers. Woo! Reading your comment there, Stephen.
The one that'll give you a lot of data is the aerial survey.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, and that's a lot of aircraft. Probably a bad example for a live training session. Let me pick one that's got sort of a lower number, and we'll do just like a 5-day. I think AWACS is probably a good example of that. So at any rate, you can, let me expand that list. All right. So there's only one AWAC that's flying at the moment. What Monkey always talks about this? I can't remember what the acronym AWAC stands for. Advanced. Somebody would drop that in the chat if you figure it out. That one always seems to escape me. Anyway, so in the watch list header, click on the expand button, and you'll get these other options. The one we're looking at is the clock with an arrow circle. Incidentally, before I do that, you can turn on the visibility circles for everything in this watch list group, also in this expanded function in the group header. So that's kind of interesting. So let's go, let me do this. All right, so that AWAC is out over, looks like Alaska. C-17s, this is probably going to be, I just wanted to show you an example of the flight, the visibility circles. All right, so let's do DHS. That's an interesting one. Oh, there's only one aircraft though. That does not make it very interesting. All right, so maybe NASA. No, there's only one other too. All right, maybe not the best time to do that example. Well, let's do Homeland Security. I think they probably have the nope. I don't see any of the balloons, the aerostats, which are normally up. But let's run this one anyway. All right, so I'm going to hit this button here, which is the visibility circles for Homeland Security, and I'm going to click on the group name itself. So we're now in isolate mode, and now we can see those 3 aircraft. So quick way to sort of toggle on and off the visibility circles. All right, little departure there. Let me now turn that off. Oh, yeah, that ball just showed up. All right, that balloon, which is the one over Yuma, I think. Yep. Or no, this one's over the Texas border. All right. Okay, cool. So back on track. Sorry about that. All right, so let's do either AWACS or TACAMO. TACAMO is a good example. Let's do that one. 16 aircraft. So we're going to pick this flight history reporting button for this group. Say proceed, because we're switching out of live air traffic mode and we're in sort of a history mode. And then what it does, it's going to grab that name of the group and drop that into the header here. And then all of those aircraft hex codes are automatically input into this input field. And so the next thing you have to do is just pick the dates. So let's pick in the last week. So let's do the 11th through the 18th. Incidentally, the historical data that I can pull to run these types of reports are they will not, you won't have same day service. There's overnight batches that run that then I utilize for building these reports. So just know that you can't get same day traffic reporting just day of. I'm sorry, everything but the day of. Anyway, so we got 7 days put in here. I'm going to go ahead and hit run report. I forgot to turn on the show traces automatically. And then it's going to ask to load the database. So we're going to get that going as well. And let this thing run. And as I might have said a couple of days ago, it first goes out and pulls all the traffic that flew. There's a list of hex codes that flew on that day. So I first go grab all that data, and then I churn through the list of aircraft specifically. And if it was flying that day, then I do a secondary lookup and actually pull the traces for that day. So we'll let this thing run. You can see the progress bars here. So we're looking through the days here, and then the aircraft will cycle through each day. And then as they build up, we get a new entry for every flight. All right, and then we get sort of a summary report at the end here saying, yep, we got 16 entries. And these aircraft fly, multiple missions per day, right? So let me pop to an overhead view, and I'll thicken the trace thickness. So now we got a good, nice high contrast. All right, you can see we got some Gulf work, got some over the states, and then really, it looks like Oklahoma is really their launch point. Yep, everything sort of came out of that. Most of them did. And incidentally, there's a new feature just in the last 3.0 update that added total times. So this is flight time of all the aircraft from all these days. So this is kind of a nice high level roll up of data. If you're doing, weekly reports, that's kind of a number that I would pull and go, oh, has it upticked or downticked based on the total time? And then for each entry, you have a start and stop point. And then it has obviously the time, and then the lookup of the closest metropolitan area to that departure and landing, and then the flight recorded span here with their registration, the tail number. The other icons, the trace you can toggle on and off. So if you wanted to turn just one trace on or off, you can do that here. I like to kind of run the whole thing as they build, just so we see all the traces. And then if you wanted to move to the, go look at this aircraft in more detail in time travel mode, that's this button here. Click on that and it's going to drop into time travel mode at the time of departure, I believe. Should be departure. So then you could start that aircraft and watch its flight pattern. All right, any other details about the flight history report? In the header area, you've got your save button, so that'll take these returns and export them out to a CSV file with basically the same data that you've got here. I believe there are deep links as well. So you can go through that file and then jump back into time travel mode based on the deep link. And then if you're running multiple reports or you want to change the days, you simply burn the report and then you'd pick a new date span, time span, and run it again. I'll pop to an overhead view. We'll see. Yeah, a slight difference here. Obviously, we've got some, Central America is typical, but this time, the week before, had some West Coast activity. All right. And again, this is something you're only going to see in SkyGlass. The ability to run these reports. Other services have these reports that you can pay for. They're not cheap. The data goes back to, we've got high quality data from March of 2020 to now. And it's on the periodicity of like every second. So there's a snapshot of all traffic everywhere that are based on, you know, from the feeders going back that far back. So you can run, you know, reports of any length. There's no limitation on those. Ren, you looked stunned. Everything okay? Did you find a bug?
No, I was just thinking, let's see. Biden was up here at an airport and there were like 20 V-22s. That'd be interesting to go back and look at that.
Yeah, find out where they went or where
Yeah,
they came
well, I know
from.
where they went, but yeah, the fact that he landed at a small airport to actually go see the public and then flew back into SeaTac to actually fly away it was kind of strange.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Okay, cool. All right. Any questions with regard to the flight history reporting? Again, you can always grab a screenshot. And yeah, like as an example, the last week, right, which was a Wednesday to Wednesday, total time was like 136 hours. And this one's almost double that, right? We get 236 hours. So definitely last week versus the week before. Again, this is a Sunday to Sunday versus Wednesday to Wednesday. There may be a difference there that would explain that, but all right. All right, 2 observations yesterday evening. Lots of activity in Wisconsin. V-22's up, yeah. Southern California, cool. Yeah, I think we actually caught those couple of V-22s doing maneuvers out over Yuma yesterday. Or maybe that was day 1. I think that was day 1. No, that was yesterday because we did Overwatch. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Steven,
Okay, cool. So
over
go ahead.
Southern California. I just
Yeah,
say, Steve,
I think that's where they're based, right? Isn't there
Yeah.
in San Diego? I usually see a lot of operations of V-22s out of San Diego. At any rate, all right, and I've actually caught a couple out over Japan. All right, so the difference, what is the difference between a flight history report and an operations report? Let me show you that. So I'm going to grab all these hex codes by just copying and pasting. And I'm going to jump into the, I'm going to turn off flight histories. I'm going to turn on and off the traces. So that gives we'll clean those traces out. You could also hit the burn button to do that. And I'm going to do operations. So the operations is a different way to kind of get at similar data. The operations endpoint, it's an API endpoint from ADSB Exchange. It's new. They're still working on this. They're working on the algorithm to sort of detect legs of landings and takeoffs. So I found that this is not a perfect system, and I'll explain why in a second. So let's do last week is again. We'll do the 11th to the 18th, and we're going to run this report. We'll turn on the traces as well. The nice part about this is that they've done all the heavy lifting, so it's very fast. Okay, and what this does then is it breaks it up into the different legs. So now the tough part's happening. It's trying to run all those traces. So we'll give it a second to let those run. But you can see here we've got there's often a mismatch of the takeoffs and landings, which shouldn't really happen unless it was an overnight flight. Like the takeoff is going to happen on one day and then they're going to land technically the next day versus in UTC time. But anyway, so we've got the traces here. Traces should look identical, but typically there's a little bit of a mismatch of the takeoffs and landings. So just so that you're aware, this is an experimental API endpoint. It's not completely baked, but you do have a little bit more granularity of the takeoffs and the departure and landing locations, and then we've got them listed here, and then you can save those out as well. And then the reporting export options, you can look at the simplified, which is just does a one, every takeoff, every landing, every operation is a line item. Or we can do a matched pair, which kind of goes and tries to match up the different ones. So a little bit slightly different format of the exported reports available. And then you can do it by aircraft, or you can actually do it by airport as well. So at the risk of Murphy kicking my butt here, let's try that. So I'm going to burn, so we get rid of all the traces. I'm going to burn the list here, and let's do MIA, airport, and let's just do yesterday. I know I'm going to get myself in trouble. I wasn't prepared to, I haven't run this demonstration yet. We'll see how it goes. All right, so let me run the report and see what we get. Ooh, a lot of data. That's all right. We'll see how it works. All right, so 1,425, that's going to be, I'll probably have to arrest this. It's going to be a lot of traces to run. But anyway, I tell you, go out to some of these other flight tracking websites that sell these reports, and they're on the order of hundreds of dollars for a day out to thousands of dollars for extended month period of time, stuff like that. So if you're into these kinds of reporting, man, this is a value and a half to be able to run your own reports with your own hardware. Anyway, this is going to take a goodly amount of time. So while we wait, I'll let it go a little bit, see kind of what interesting graphic this is going to paint. But while we're waiting, any questions with regards to anything really, but specifically flight history reports and flight operations reports? Boy, everybody's just chilled out on day 3. I think I sucked all the energy out on day 1 and 2.
Is the loading time a function of your bandwidth, your server, or your computer, or all the above?
Well, I think the complete answer is all the above. This reporting that I'm doing here actually has no impact or is not trying to touch my SkyGlass server. So that's sort of out of the equation. The biggest impact is really downloading the trace data. So that's from the ADSB Exchange server, because these are long traces, especially out of a major metropolitan area like Miami. That's going to be a lot of aircraft that are flying all day long. So we're getting 24-hour types of traces. And then on the level of what your bandwidth is like. So that's the next bottleneck. If you've got a big fat pipe, then you're going to get the data a little bit faster. So those are the kind of the two limitations. Once the data is in the rendering, then it becomes a function of your graphics processing unit and your computer. So I think those are the two main bottlenecks are, speed of pulling from the website, from the endpoint, which is ADSB Exchange, and then the rendering speed. All right, cool. So now we kind of get an interesting view of kind of what came in and out of Miami in a day's time frame. Interesting that we don't get a lot of Mexican flights or flights out of Mexico, not much out of Canada either. That is interesting, to me at least. All right, a couple of transatlantic flights. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Good question, Stephen. Okay, so for most of you folks that do military, monitoring, this may or the flight operations may or may not be useful. It's kind of a specialized piece. If you are a Part 135 operator or managing a fleet, I think this would be very useful and cost effective for you. All right, so let me. I'm going to go ahead and burn, and I'll burn the traces as well. And let's see here. All right, so final area of discussion are tips and tricks. If you'll notice, just to point out, when you drop into operations mode or flight history mode, the top button is grayed out, meaning you're not in live traffic mode anymore. It's important to kind of isolate those because you've got mixed of data of like historical data versus now data. And when you exit out of flight history mode, then you're clearly back in live tracking mode. All right, so let's talk about some tips and tricks. All right, so let me make this a little bit larger, just so everybody can see it okay. All right, so first thing, did you know, so let me get the window here so I can see both. There we are. Okay, did you know there are keyboard commands within SkyGlass. You don't have to use your mouse. The WASD keys will do the translation. So I'm just using WASD, up, down, right, left. The Q and the E, so this might be helpful. Let me turn on the targets just so we can see. We've got this center of the camera target. This is our home location. So the Q and the E will elevate, right? That point of rotation for your camera. So I'm raising it up off the ground. Now you can really see the difference. W, A, S, and D. And then the arrow keys will do your rotation. So right, left key will pivot right and left, clockwise, counterclockwise, and then the up and down is going to, move yourself up and down around that pivot point. So if you want to do some cool like cinematic stuff, which is where I try and do my screen grabs, this is what I use. I use the WASD and then the, let me get back down on the ground. There we go. So you can kind of get some cool cinematic stuff by panning and looping and moving all at the same time. All right. If you only have a trackpad or a single button mouse, I don't know how many folks actually have single button mouse, but there are ways to option into the rotation. And that is if you can use a control key and your left will rotate, and then your option drag left will do the raise and lower. So I find the Q and the E to bring, raising and lowering. So let me actually load traffic and I'll give you an example. If you have aircraft loaded and you have the jumper on, I'll wait for that traffic to finish loading. And you have the jumper on, then if you click on an aircraft, it's going to jump the camera to that location, but also its altitude, right? So now it's the center pivot point. So you can see we're actually way above the ground. So if you are kind of like, well, I just want to be mousing around to get the pivot point back down to the terrestrial surface layer, then I use that Q key, will bring it back down. Or you can, as I was saying, you can use the option key to drag down, and it's going to slam me down right to the surface. Okay, cool. And as we've talked about the last couple of days, using the shift key and double clicking on the map will automatically rehome to that double click position. All right, so moving on, any questions about the keyboard commands? Nope. All right, so just some notes about how to get the most out of your computer, optimizing performance. You want to think about what your setup is and what an optimum auto refresh is. For example, if you're looking at like what we've got here, country span, big and wide view, and then, military aircraft, doing this 1 second updates is kind of meaningless. It's pointless, right? You can get away with doing a 1 minute or a 30 second, and you're still going to have plenty of data and you're saving a lot of bandwidth, right? So just be mindful of, depending on what you're trying to do and what your mission profile is, tuning your auto refresh timing to match what's useful for you. When I get out over my own area of operations, or if I'm looking at a specific airport up close, that's when you want to turn that auto refresh up much higher, because then it makes more sense. You're getting kind of a much more close to a real-time view of the traffic. You know, when you're looking at just an airport runway, a lot can happen in 15 seconds, right? So that's when you'd want to turn your aircraft or the auto refresh up to a higher rate of refresh. Okay. As I've really tried to hammer down the point, the search radius when you're in standard mode is really everything. You want to maintain your search radius to what your computer can handle. And there's been very, very, very few exceptions to traffic or to computers that can handle more than about 1500 is when I start to see a real degradation of updates. You'll see them just start to render out. The first 500 are fast, then it starts to slow down. And then once you hit about 2000, it just starts to crawl. And that's really due to the graphics memory, the GPU memory, and the capabilities of your GPU. I think there was one, Ren, you help remind me, was it a Lenovo laptop? Somebody had a Lenovo laptop and was able to just like run full everything, all 15,000 aircraft across the planet with traces. It was just incredible what he was able to pull out. And it was only taking him like 15, 20 minutes per refresh, which is pretty amazing. Go ahead.
I said, was that Brainstorm or?
No, it was somebody early on. I just remember they had a Lenovo,
Yeah.
and I thought,
I remember that, yeah.
where did this Windows laptop just have all this power? I mean, I think it was, I think it's probably a gaming laptop, but it was, to have it be a laptop and not a desktop with a monster, GPU or graphics card was just surprising to me. But anyway, the point is, limit your search radius to what you can handle. Basically, if you're with a medium size or average kind of workstation nowadays, anything up to about 1,000, you'll probably be able to manage well. Keep it below 100 or 200 miles, and you'll be able to manage that quite easily. Anything out over 250, and again, if you add traces to that, that adds a lot more data. 1 3-hour trace is about the same as data as all military aircraft rendered at one time, right? So you have to think about the traces, the data. It's every 1 second position out however many hours. So that's a lot of data. So you have to be conscious of this button here, the show all. That's why I give a little warning now. So are you sure you want to do this? Because it's going to cost you. So beware to run all traffic, all traces. People do it, which is not a problem. I actually extended the auto refresh timing out to now 5 minutes. It used to be 2 minutes, or actually I think it used to be 1 minute. And then I had a request from someone to say, well, I like to run all traces for the whole continent for all military aircraft in my watch list. I think this was the same person that had like an 18,000 aircraft watch list or 22,000, something like that, really high. Anyway, and so this kind of leads to my next point. The auto refresh, if you have traces on, it takes time. So that what will happen within SkyGlass, it'll do the traffic position first, and then it will try and update the traces. And the traces, unfortunately, are on a per aircraft level. So let's say if you've got hundreds of aircraft that are rendered with traces, it's got to go make, with every auto refresh cycle, it's got to make 1 call per aircraft to find that aircraft data, and then do the rendering. So it does add to the overall time of a full refresh cycle, if that makes sense. Traces do. It's much better in this last iteration. As far as SkyGlass only looks for the gap, like when was the last time it rendered, and then fill in the gap. It doesn't try to redo the entire trace. But anyway, if you have traces on for a huge group or for all aircraft, you just want to make sure that your auto refresh timing is not going to try and start a new auto refresh cycle before that last one is actually completed. Okay, so monitor the little big bar that shows up when it starts to load traffic. This guy, when it's loading traces. Well, let's go ahead and do it now. So let me do. We'll do 5-minute traces for all aircraft. We'll keep the keep length on. Keep length, by the way, this will maintain that trace length to that 5-minute mark, right? So if you turn this off, then 5 minutes, as if you let it run for another 10 minutes, then that trace will be 15 minutes long, which can again add to the data, add to the memory required. So I like to keep this at length, and then it keeps everything to the time span that you specified. At any rate, so let me turn that on, say yep, we're going to get past the warning, and you can see as the debug loads, every one of these little hex codes, it's making a bunch of requests. This has some other costs in that the server will start to get angry at too many requests at a time. And so I kind of tried to find a balance. I didn't want to throttle down the amount of requests that it was making. And because if I timed out like, well, every only do 10 a second, then rendering, aircraft would take much longer than just getting rebuffed from the server when it says no more requests. And so what I do is if a request errors, it goes into a requeue log, or a queue of traces to try and poll again. And then once it gets through all those, it cleans up the ones that were rebuffed, et cetera, et cetera. So at any rate, the traces take a lot of effort, take a lot of bandwidth. Just be mindful of that. I think they're very, very cool from the sense of if you're in standard mode. So let me kind of work another example just for the grins of it. So let's go into, let's look at LAX. And I'll zoom in a lot. And we'll get to, 50 miles. Let's do 25 miles. And again, what do we do first time we do a map zoom? I'm going to bring that height adjustment slider down. And our sizing, I'm going to turn the jumper off. Let's load some traffic. And let's see here, we've got 252 loaded, so you can see the traffic starting to pull in here. So I'm going to bring this pretty far, almost, it's all the way down. So we're at actual altitude. And I guess the point I was trying to make here is when you run all traces for a local area, then you immediately see where the approach and departure points are, which I think is kind of cool. Let me back up one level, zoom out, and we'll run another trace or run another refresh, and we'll see what happens here. It's also interesting to see, you can see where the holding patterns are. If there's weather and there's holds for weather, you can see where the aircraft are aggregated. Okay. All right, cool. So I think I've probably driven that point home pretty well about traces and the memory required for traces. Let's see. So we talked about limiting traces by, so in lieu of doing show all traces, which are effective on a small geographic span, you can run traces for just a watch list group for a specific aircraft, and you can gang them up. If you want to sort of reset the traces, the quickest way to do that is just to turn them off. And that's going to clear all the traces for every aircraft that's rendered. I've talked about the show all traces plus auto refresh creates a heavy load, so you have to manage the auto refresh timing based on the number of traces that you got. And then it's probably pretty obvious, shorter trace lengths have a lower memory hit than longer trace lengths as far as the trace depth. And you can go all the way out to everything that's flown that day. All right. So with regards to limiting memory, search radius and number of aircraft is kind of the obvious one there. You can also limit by class of aircraft we talked about, standard, military, mast, or just the emergency ones. You can save memory by shortening that trace length if you're running traces. I think this is something that I didn't finish talking about. Okay, the map style also has a memory hit. So the satellite style is really the most memory consumptive. So these 2D or high contrast, simpler maps have less color data. There's actually less memory hit. So if you are really trying to maintain your maximum memory for performance, you can change to a simpler map view, or map style rather. And then in addition, the terrain, which kind of gives it the three-dimensional relief of the map, that costs some performance, as well as the buildings. So if you're out over a let me zoom way into the LAX, and I'll turn the buildings on just so you can see what they look like when they render out. But this is probably of the two, the biggest performance hit will be the buildings. You're only going to get them though at the higher zoom levels, meaning if you zoom out to sort of countrywide, they don't even render. But here we go. You can see all that geometry. That's a lot of yeah, it's not even letting me do a lot of, I can't even drag yet. Pretty bogged down. So be careful with the building geometries. They cost a lot. Yeah, there we go. How are you liking the new map style? I changed the colorization of the map to really highlight the, in this blue one, in the airport runways and taxiways. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, also database. Did you know you can, in the preferences, so let me turn on the preferences, and in this section on the top right, you can set the aircraft database to automatically load up when you launch SkyGlass, which will increase the loading time, your startup time. But if you're going to be doing consistent database work, that might be something you want. Auto load at start, and then you can have it auto update every time you launch SkyGlass. So every new session, it'll go grab the latest version of the database, bring it down for you. So a couple options there. You can also manually do the update of your database here. All right. And yeah, that's about it. So just another couple of quick things about this Save Preference panel. In this center lower section is where you can do some resets, meaning if you've got your user interface, tailored in such a way that you kind of got yourself into a cul-de-sac, you don't know how to get back, you can reset all the interface settings here. You can do a full reset, which pretty much will wipe all the settings that are saved and then start you off from all the defaults. If you have a current watch list, it'll actually give a warning and say, hey, have you backed up your watch list? Let's back it up for you. Let's export it just as a safety measure, because this full reset actually clears your watch lists, clears color data, everything. And then if you get into the color changes, you can reset them here. Let me just talk about that. In the Pro level, this other button, click there and you've got a couple of sort of hidden features. And this one is where you can actually go and take, you can manually adjust the colors of all the different classes. So you can change what standard, military, and massed aircraft look like, emergencies, what your watch list aircraft look like, etc. So there's a bit of, and you can change the border color, the background color, and the profile, the icon profile. So if you want to do some customization, you can do that. And if you want to reset that, one way to do it is through the preferences panel. You can also just choose the reset by going back to the defaults this way. Okay. Any questions? I think we've hit the end. The end of the line. You have mastered SkyGlass now. So many SkyGlass masters. That's fantastic. Okay, cool. So I'm going to bring this camera over so I can see you guys. Any questions before we wrap it up? We went about an hour and 15 minutes, so not too bad.
We're masters until tomorrow when you add a new feature.
Boy, yeah, I do like to add the new features. It's so much more fun to add new than to polish old, but I'm trying to be disciplined, keep squashing those bugs. Any questions? Any feedback? anything else you want to say? Is there anything? I don't see Richard here from yesterday. Oh, that's unfortunate. I did have a follow-up question. I realized we didn't get to his suggestion about a watch list resize. I kind of wanted to explore that with him a little bit more. Maybe I'll try and find him offline. All right.
In the
Okay,
future,
well, go
I
ahead.
have a question. In the future, are you going to offer either an online or a printed manual?
So there is a wiki, which is kind of a, evolving, crowdsourced, my beautiful people on Discord, they help to sort of maintain that a little bit. So the wiki is one example of where you can get some information. I doubt that I will ever do a full manual, just because every new feature requires a rewrite, and that's going to be very difficult to maintain. And being a one-man shop here, it's I got to really prioritize. I think I would like to do to develop the keyboard shortcuts and put out some sort of quick reference type material. I think that would be a good thing. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue to do these trainings. I will say though, with the advent of AI and the ability to do a training and then it capture all that I've said and organize it and that kind of stuff, I've actually been working on a Chat GPT version of a SkyGlass prompt. So that may be something I'm looking at to integrate. So you ask it questions and it'll tell you what to do. I'm still testing that, but I think that's probably a higher possibility than putting out a full printed or downloadable PDF. I think short versions, like I said, quick reference guides are probably closer to something I can maintain more easily. I hope that's okay. And I'm a visual learner and I tend to be biased in that direction. But if enough people ask for it, I will respond to the market for sure. Is that something that you'd really find useful, Stephen, as a printed manual?
Well,
What
I
about-
just think from other programs that I've worked with that there'd be like a one sheet plasticized key or, things like that. Something simple, a quick reference guide.
Okay, good. So my instincts were right in that regard of doing a quick reference sheet would be good. All right, good. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate that feedback. All right, so quick reference. And just to push it a little bit further, and anybody can pop this in the chat, what would be the highest priority items to put on that quick reference that you've learned so far? Because I've really covered almost everything today in the last couple of days. So what would be the best quick reference items, and I'll make those the highest priority. I did actually want to ask you guys some questions. We'll kind of lead into that as the last part of our session here.
I think we have these fast manuals. I think they're called I had mine sitting here and I don't see it now, but it's called a oh, here it is. It's called the Nifty Mini Manual, and they're made for amateur radio. And it's just a small, I don't know, it's probably got 12 pages in it. And it just gives a little bit of a breakdown of how to do each function. So if you're wanting to open up like I don't know, say you want to do traces, then you would, you could do, you could say hit the trace button and then an arrow over to the right that says, then go to this button, kind of just a breakdown of kind of each menu item that's there. So people can kind of, for the visual ones that want to actually read it, and then put it in just to a small printable type quick reference guide. I mean, this is a $800 radio that has a nifty manual that kind of just hits on every function that's kind of what you can do. So
okay, I love it. I think that's a great suggestion.
Short and quick.
So here's something that I just was going to show a few examples of this. So often when I am responding to a user question, I'll do a quick screen grab. And I know Ren does a lot of this too on Discord. and kind of just do some call outs. So what am I trying to do here? This is how to adjust your mouse sensitivity. So this is a great example if you want to actually grab a screenshot of this. I wanted to cover some of these, a couple of the ones that I've used in the last week or so. You know, my mouse is too sensitive, or I want to slow it down. It's too fast. I find that this is one of those areas where there's just so much variety with mouse sensitivity, right? Because it's driven by the settings of your mouse and then into SkyGlass, etc. So you've got some control here in this instance, and then you've got, you know, how to do it. First, turn on the vertical sliders, then do the expand, and then here's your there's the money shot here with your mouse sensitivity. As another example, let me pull this together. Oh, there we go. All right, can everybody see that? So here we've got a couple of different options about the aircraft database and views of the goal is to get the aircraft database information on screen. There are sort of two ways to do that. The bottom one in the darker blue is the labels function. And then the other one is to create it in the HUD. So maybe this would be a good sort of a way to kind of do single screen workflows of the different features if I can condense it into a single frame. Here is another example. And let's see, this one's about, oh, right, the link home location to the map view. I don't know if you've all noticed, but the default, I think I covered this on day one, but the default is to keep the center of the map and the home sort of co-located. So if you start off over the US and then you drag over to Europe, as soon as you get about halfway outside of your current search radius, it'll rehome. And if you want to turn that off, then this is the workflow to do that. Okay, cool. So, all right, quick reference, step through the different major features. I'm probably less apt to do a printed version unless I can find something that does, you know, a print on demand. But I, you know, keeping inventory is probably the worst case for someone that's got a small operation like me. But I could very easily do a PDF version that you could print out yourself. But a print on demand would, you know, plasticize would be very cool. I see the value of that. But anyway, okay, cool. Anything else that would be good?
I think a PDF version is probably more than acceptable, because
okay,
if you want it on your computer, you've got it on your computer. You can read it at any time. You want to print it, you got the ability to print it, and that way you don't have to actually print a whole thick, you know, whatever you put out manual type thing. So I think PDF is more than acceptable, in my opinion.
Okay, groovy, awesome. The other idea that I've been working with is in the SkyGlass app itself, in the hover, to have a little link here that would go out to the wiki page of that. So you go a little like a deeper level, but again, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the wiki maintenance. I can see Ren grimacing already.
Yeah, and every time we make a change, it's going to change the link. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. All right, so I think we're settling on a nice condensed PDF quick reference guide would be a sweet spot. Okay, good. I love it. Awesome. I appreciate that feedback. Okay, great. All right, so any other questions before I roll? I got a couple questions for you. If you want to take just a couple more minutes in the chat, feel free to drop this in. So my two questions to you are, what was the most useful thing that you've learned in these last 3 days? And I'm sure there's a few, things. If you want to mention more than one, that's okay. But really, what's the top most useful thing you've learned with SkyGlass?
30 minutes is actually an hour and a half.
Yeah, don't trust Goa's timing of how long the class is going to go.
But you know what? Even though it has been, we've been here for an hour and a half each time, you know, I could sit here all day and discuss, you know, this, and we could learn, you know, more and more as we go. But I think for the important thing for me was to just the review actually shows you that you really don't know everything. And when you think you do, well, go back and look at it again because you probably missed something. You know, something as simple as me asking earlier, can you go back and show me where that, you know, how you got that menu? And it's staring at me in the face. If it was a snake, it would have bit me. But I just completely overlooked it. So the ability to be able to review this with others and with you, um, it only makes all of us better. So, you know, I've learned several new things, you know, that I thought I knew. Even going back to the first aid, the basic stuff, you know, you kind of just either forget it or just don't remember that you learned it. So I've learned quite a bit.
Great. Awesome. I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, and you know, it's definitely it's an evolving and has evolved a lot since the first day, for sure. Even just this, like the forward positions, this new feature, I did not expect how strong it would be as a visual reference for speed. I mean, it's such a clear correlation of like the longer the forward position is just a very fast, you know, intuitive look at speed. And every time I add something new, there's obviously, you know, a lot of things that get changed and refined. And then, you know, based on your guys' feedback, there's a lot of updates and things that happen on that level too. So great. Okay, cool. Any other thoughts on most important or most useful thing you've learned? Okay, my next question was, what are you able to do now with SkyGlass that you didn't have, that you weren't able to do before you took this training, if that makes sense? So really, what are you now able to do or empowered to do with SkyGlass that you were not able to before we had this training session? Put another way, what will you be doing now with SkyGlass that you weren't doing before? You know, now that you feel like you've learned how to do it, whether it's maybe Overwatch areas or weather or watch list stuff, flight history reports.
I think for me, it was a combination of the radar, weather, and sigmets, airmets, putting those together. I hadn't tried that particular combination yet, so that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I love that. And really that's you can you throw a rock and hit a weather service, right? I mean, that's so common. People are really, they've been asking for it since day one. I'm so glad it's finally part of SkyGlass. But you know, overlaying it with the airmets and sigmets really tell another level of the story. So I'm glad you see the value of that, Marin. I love that. That's very cool for me. And you know, as a pilot, flying IMC was really like, that was the scariest part, because if you're not prepared to go into it, I always found that to be very high stress, you know, part of flying when you're in inclement weather. So really having that's really very top level view, and not having to do the math of like, you know, I was always in light aircraft, which I was, you know, maximum, you know, 20,000 feet was my service level, but I typically never flew that high because you got to put oxygen on after 12,000, right? So I was 10,000 and below. And, you know, I was always having to like, oh, wow, there's this, you know, turbulence area here, and realize, oh no, it's all the higher levels. So it really doesn't apply to me, you know, being able to sort of really just visually pick out those things would be very helpful, or I find very useful from a top level sort of situational awareness for weather. Yeah, good. Okay, cool. Any other comments on what you feel like you can do now versus what you were able to do before? So I see Neil is creating more organized watch lists. Very cool. A little tip since you mentioned that, a little tip there. Sometimes you'll get watch list groups. Let me turn off auto refresh just so we're not hampered by that. All right, cool. And let me minimize some of these things as well. Doop, doop. Okay, good. Watch list groups, organizing things into the watch list group. So Here's a good example. Often I'll be, scanning the field and I'll see a new aircraft that I want to add. For example, in this one, this is the BTB-2. This is one of those Turkish military drones, new class that really just surfaced in the last 18 months or so is when they really started to crank these guys out. Anyway, so did you know you can drag and drop from one group to another? So you do that via the icon itself. And so first I'm going to find my drone group here. Where's my drone group? Oh, right over there. All right, so grab it, drag it into the drones, and release. So let's make sure it actually went there. Yeah, and then we refresh. Okay, so it didn't do it. Let me try that again. Load the watch list. Might have gotten a little confused because of the. No, it did. Perfect. There we go. Boom. Yep. So there's that BTB2. So again, you can drag, grabbing the profile icon, and then drag it into a new group, and that's how you can kind of quickly move aircraft around. I've also found sometimes I will want to condense two groups into one group, or vice versa. The easy way to condense them is to just pick which name is sort of the most important and change that one group name to match the other group name, and they will condense. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, some of this stuff is like, old database hacks and, working with spreadsheets, and how to like figure out just like, well, you want to combine things, just call them the same thing and they'll organize. So those are some of the tricks there. What else? We talked about, the database, using the database to add groups in full. Yeah. So good stuff. Any other things to wrap up before we let go?
Got
Yes.
a quick question about
Yes,
watch
sir.
list. If I were to download Monkey's watch list and then one of yours, and you both have the same plane in it, is it going to create a duplicate, or will it recognize that? And
Right. So it does do a check and make sure that you're not adding duplicates. So as it's importing, it says, does it already exist? If it does exist, what will happen is, if it's in a new, if let's say you're downloading a new group, a list, and it's in a different group, it will be reassigned to that new group.
okay, very good.
But it will not create duplicates. Yeah, that would be a bad thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it will reorganize into a group differently in the same way that you do a database. If you're putting things from the database, if something already exists, you can move it into a new group just by pushing that new group reorganization piece. Yeah. So that's
All right.
that's the only handle there. I highly recommend doing backups, and like, the watch lists become very valuable. People can put a lot of time and effort into them, and it's not hard to like lose it, in the sense of, oh, you're going to download a new one and all you have to do is hit that wrong, like replace add, and you've trashed your watch list, right? So I like to maintain a constant, like, here's my current watch list. I push it up to the SkyGlass cloud just so I have my latest, right? But often I'll do the export, which are these buttons here. Export the watch list, just save it as a file, put my name on it, put the date on it, just so I can kind of always have a backup that I can go back to if I need to. And again, with the ability to like import that in and then blend them if you need to, you can always have a nice robust watch list. So in the same way, the saved setups, right now there's just sort of a master list that's maintained currently. There's no way to move things. Now that the response has been pretty good and I haven't had much feedback about any bugs in the saved setups system, we'll be adding that. So we'll be able to push your saved setups up to the cloud and then bring it down on a different device. You'll be able to export it. I don't think there's a real utility in sharing the saved setups. But if people find value in that, I'm happy to work that out. Anyway, yeah. And I kind of feel like the saved setups will replace the saved locations, the saved home locations. I don't know. I'm finding great utility in the saved setups. What do you guys think? Are you liking the saved setups? Have you been using it at all?
I have not used it yet.
Oh, we'll
I
jump
will.
into it. I think it's super fun. For example, like as I was saying earlier, let me make this a little bit larger and move this off. All right, cool. Go full screen here. All right, so you kind of we'll get down to like what's your mission profiles with SkyGlass, and you can kind of see with mine. Here's local area, standard. And then that's the airport that's sort of just south of me, so I kind of sometimes need to look at that. But USA military, so fast. I mean that shaves off a couple minutes worth of going through the steps, and then I cleaned up. I had probably 18 setups before I started the class, but I wanted to sort of start from fresh from your guys' perspective. But I had a Europe-based military, so I could pop back and forth real quickly. And then weather is a great little setup as well. So we're kind of gang up, the airmets, sigmets. I guess I had the watch list in there as well. Didn't expect that. That's all right. Oh, I may have messed up my list here. This is the one I set up before. Yeah, USA weather and airmets, sigmets. So again, and you can see it's going to change the map style. It's going to change the height adjustment slider, change all the different modes. Do the weather overlays as well. I find this super useful because this is kind of how I start my day out. Like, let's get a hold of the weather, and then I start to drill into, what's the traffic that I want to focus on. What are people doing? I think ultimately maybe there's some utility in some saved reports kind of things. It's challenging though because some of this data, like one thing I didn't expect is I'm frequently going back into the database and rerunning the searches because like the Q4s and Q9s, there's new ones added. It feels like every time I go back, there's a new one. And so you really got to keep maintaining that. One thing I also didn't expect from the shared watch lists, the ability to need to update those. Right now, you're just going to have to delete the one that you posted, repost another one. I don't know if I showed you that. That's a feature that we really haven't talked about too much. You can you can share just a group, or you can share your entire watch list. So if we go to the group level, because I found that I was like, I just want to, share the Leos, right? So like, here's the police group, and then here's your share button, and then you can say, do you want to export it just for your own backup local copy, or you can share it, and it'll just be shared with that group name. So those are also super useful if you're going to be, sharing it with other people or find something interesting. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Any other comments, questions, thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, you just used the double arrows to open up the watch list, and I think you and I had this conversation before. Can we get those same double arrows for the type list?
Yes, it's definitely on my list, and I do appreciate it. The type list category list is definitely a functional one. Yeah. These list panels take a fair like this one here. I had to roll my own, meaning I had to develop, and it took me a good month to code like just this functionality, right? The other ones are the ones that come right from this development engine Unity, and the problem is that they're very expensive from a memory point perspective. Every line item is memory, and so in this list it dynamically adjusts, so like only what's loaded in memory is what you can see, whereas the other ones are like everything. Anyway, too much detail. I hear your point. Yeah. All right. So, and again,
I just find that, especially with the watch list, I use the double chevrons more than I think than I use to just grab the 4 arrows and pull it around. I mean, I use both, but I
Yeah.
find that the double arrows definitely work out, for me a lot better.
Got it. Okay. I hear you. Yeah. So again, in addition to this, just have a little button, boom, and then it maximizes. You see everything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, as I've learned from this 3-day session, I think the first real big new feature that's coming out is to do a type list panel that's country centric. I think that's going to be real useful. And then, like you have in the watch list, where your hidden and isolate groups are persistent, right? I think I'd like to do the same thing for the type list panel, so that once you've gone into the type list panel and sort of like, I never want to see Cessna 172s, hide those, that kind of thing, so that it's remembered between sessions. What do you guys think of that? Does that be useful? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, this is like some people like go in and the feedback that I've gotten is like, it takes me, 2 minutes every time I go in to pick all the ones that I don't want and all that. And then, you run it for several hours. And if that group drops off, it's dynamically removed from the list and there's no persistence. So adding a little bit of persistence is sort of one other feature I'd like to sort of build in. Say again?
I'd say in conjunction with that in the watch list, what about saving the maximum visibility in those settings as well?
Yes, good point.
Yeah. And
okay.
On for that particular group.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Anything's possible. Often I'll like to create a new feature and kind of give some time to the feature to kind of see what people are, what's useful, what's not, myself included. How am I using it? Yeah, and the visibility performance circles are definitely a new feature, meaning it's early in its evolution. So having some persistence for the aircraft visibility and yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to make a note of that.
I have a comment. I'm a 3-day newbie. So as a 3-day newbie, I feel like I've been under Niagara Falls for 3 days. But at the same time, my saving grace is my military background, my following Monkey Works for several years, and being familiar with aviation in general. So, but I will be talking to you in the future, make an appointment and go over some things.
I look forward to that. Awesome. Yeah, apologize that it's been a bit of a learning by fire hose experience. But yeah, I'm glad we got to cover a lot. I'm going to stop share now and wrap up. Let's see here. Boom, boom. How do I do that? Stop sharing. Great. Cool. So now I can see everybody. Awesome. Good feedback. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's time and attention. I really appreciate all the feedback and all the suggestions. I learn a ton from interacting with users. I always think of I don't know if you guys are any Tron fans in the field here, folks that love Tron. Like, I fight for the user. Like, that's how I feel sometimes. Interacting with you guys is like really getting to understand what the priorities are, what will make your guys' life more efficient, more fun, more useful from this flight tracking perspective. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And again, find me online. Go to the avrlabs.com website use the chat button if you want to get me from a quick perspective. There's a new booking feature where you can book some time with me, either for tech support or for a demonstration, or if you've got a business-to-business kind of special need and need some consulting on that level to do some special coding for you, which I've done for other organizations. Happy to do that. You can book time for that. I try and make myself super accessible, usually from about 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Whilst you guys do try and get me on the weekends, I try and hold those off for myself, but hey, I'm always around. So if you need help, especially with signing on, if you find yourself locked out, reach out and I'm happy to help. So anyway, really appreciate you guys' Patreon support. Those are Patreon folks. You can find those links to Discord, Patreon, YouTube, etc. on the bottom of the website. And for those folks that are watching this on YouTube or after the fact, feel free to drop me any questions there, or find me on the website and give any feedback or ask your questions there. I'm happy to connect with you. So with that, I will say goodbye. Thank you guys all so much. Have a great rest of your week. All right. Thanks for being here. We'll talk soon. Cheers.